Shalom and welcome to this week's Living Torah as we turn the page from Vayikra, Leviticus, over to Bamidbar, or Numbers. Before I get there, just want to make a bit of an announcement of some things that have been going on for Kathy and myself personally. And I've got to be a little bit vague here just because this goes all over and you can probably understand why. But for the last couple of months, Kathy's been dealing with some health issues. And as I'm recording right now, she's actually in the hospital for a couple of days going through some tests. Again, I apologize that I'm not able to give details much more than that. We have no reason to believe that they're not going to find the cause of these issues and it'd be straightened out. So it's just one of those things that we're going through. And so if over the last couple of months, there's been a couple of weeks that you've watched this or listened or whatever you do, and you've been like, wow, he doesn't seem quite all there. Well, at least I've got a reason at the moment. So appreciate your prayers. I kind of feel like I was reading a post yesterday, I guess it was, as I've been sitting in a hospital room for a little while, which anybody that knows me knows that that's not really one of my favorite places or anybody's favorite place in the world. There's just not a whole lot to do there. So reading through some things, that somebody said that they had stopped by the gas station and put diesel, a few quarts of diesel in their gas tank, and was wondering what the ramifications were since they would have. And I'm like, how do you do that, considering that the nozzle is different size for a reason? And then I was reminded, of the sign there behind me that says, yes, you can't fix stupid. So people just continue to prove that statement absolutely true. So that's kind of how I feel a little bit. The post back in where, well, it's going to be maybe a little sluggish. You might need to get some cleaner for the injectors or something. But yeah, I kind of felt like that. But Kathy's in. She's at peace with all that's going on. We've got some where she's at is great care. We've been up there, a few times, and so again, have no reason to believe that things are not going to turn out well. And so, if you see once in a while, there's on my newsletter that. It says, I couldn't record a program. I do 4 programs a week, and the scheduling on those sometimes is just beyond our control. With Israel Update and Hanok, with him back working as tour guide. Barry Phillips actually is on vacation this week, and of course the Life on Purpose. Putting 4 people in at the same time in the same place can at times be a challenge. So if you see that I don't have teachings, a couple of them in a week, we got some reasons going on right now. So I do appreciate your prayers. Though I can't give details, the Father knows all the details, which is really encouraging. So and also for those that continue to support this ministry, the work that we do. All over with Israel, various things that we have our hand into. If CDs go out a little bit late, you understand why. If maybe a check was not deposited right away, you understand why. We don't have a staff. Okay, it's Join to Hashem is 2 people. Me and Kathy. You call our office. You're actually calling our house. We don't have an editing staff. We don't have a bookkeeping staff. We just got the 2 of us, and it's worked out pretty well so far. And it is, we operate by faith, but you guys are part of that faith. And so for those that support us, believe in what we do, I received a note last week in the mail, and when someone takes the time, when someone donates, it's to me it's humbling to begin with, but someone took the time and wrote a short note, and Kathy read that, handed it to me, and once again just brought tears to my eyes. It's no way to. I'm just going to quit because there's no way for me to explain the gratitude and the responsibility that I feel because of those who have entrusted not just your time and prayers, but also your finances into what we do. So I'll try to keep you updated as much as I possibly can. I go from there. Okay. In the desert is how this is translated, Bamidbar. And keep in mind that as we go through this book, the first 10 chapters of Bamidbar happen within the first 20 days. They happen in 20 days. We see that this is the second month of the second year after they had left the land of Egypt. They are as we are right now, they're into the counting of the Omer. When I put this video, will go up, God willing, on Thursday, and that will be, in my counting, will be day 40, which is a very special day that I think we should all commemorate. That is the day that we see in the book of Acts, Acts chapter 1, the day of the Ascension. And the day that we should be, that should be like an extra special day to us, because as we look at the promises that have been given to us, the promise of a resurrection, the promise that his return will be, and that he will set up his kingdom upon this earth. May it be in our day, and may it be soon, with all that's happening in the world around us. So this is kind of the time frame where we're at right now in the Gregorian calendar is very similar to the days that they were in right there, and it is kind of of course it says to read it here in English. I spoke to Moshe in the Sinai desert, but if we look at it in Hebrew, a little different way. Of course, the Hebrew language you say things in our estimation, as with other languages, many other languages, we would say that they're saying it backwards, but it's really that maybe we're saying it backwards, okay? Hebrew's right to left, and there you pronounce things different than you do as far as the verbs and the nouns and all those kind of things. So it's literally is more saying, and spoke Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh to Moshe. Now, there's one little nuance here I want to bring out, that when we look at the word Moshe or Moses in Hebrew, it is actually connected to the letters, or to the two letters for El, okay, the Aleph and the Lamed. So it is that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, God, El Shaddai, Elohim, okay, let's move on through all of his names there. He is elevated Moshe to a status that is, we shouldn't, I don't want to say above the people, but Moshe is a representative. I mentioned to our congregation, to Life Assembly last week, that there is a verse that it scares me, literally scares me. It's found in the book of Yaakov, or James chapter 3, and it says, "Let not many of you become teachers, because you will have a greater judgment." And one of our men, Chris, part of our congregation, is begin to do some teaching for us, and some of the other guys, I'm bringing them in. I don't want Life Assembly to be, the Mike Clayton show. But that was not directed at anybody, by the way. That was just a statement. But I said to them, I said, when you come up here and you share something, whether it's a 2-minute devotional or a 5-minute devotional, whatever it is, understand that you are now being elevated to a place that you are responsible for the words that you are speaking. We should all look at that, because this is the way we should all look at ourselves, because as you are passing on a baton to your children, to your grandchildren. I know some very close friends in Oklahoma this past year that it was kind of like I did this year. It was the passing of the baton of not leading Passover, and allowing your children and your grandchildren to be a part of that. We should all look at ourselves in a place of teaching. Parents, I mean, what is a parent? My definition of a parent is someone who is able to keep someone alive until they have the sense to do so for themselves. But that's, what are we doing? We're teaching. And is a teacher, especially for a parent or in anything really, the essence of a great teacher is you're always attempting to work yourself out of a job to where the person becomes the teacher and then can pass that on to other generations. So Moshe is in that place of being elevated in the camp as the one responsible and standing before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh for his actions. We see that over and over again. And so it says, and spoke Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh to Moshe. It's termed, and these are maybe some statements I've made numerous times, but it's always said that they were wandering in the wilderness. I want you to consider, as we read through the book of Bamidbar this time, how much wandering were they doing? I really don't see any. I don't see a moment in time that they were wandering anywhere, but it was uncharted territory for them. They didn't know where they were. They knew the end result. They didn't know how that a lot of them weren't going to make it. They knew the place that they were going to. However, not a single one of them had ever stepped foot there. They knew the promises. They were going by what the stories have been passed down generation to generation in Egypt. All of the years, every generation would tell the story of, passing on to their children, their grandchildren, of, there's a place that our forefathers came from. We came into this place with this many people, and this is not our home, and this is a place of exile. But that message over time became watered down. I would imagine the first generations, they were, we're only here for a certain amount of time. But then after generations pass, it's like, well, maybe this is home. Maybe the granddad didn't really know what he was talking about. So we might want to sink our roots down a little bit deeper in this place. And the farther those roots went down, the harder it was to convince another generation that was just a place that they were visiting, instead of a place that was called exile. Message in that. I had a person years ago that asked me a question. They said, Mike, do you really believe we are at the end of the age? And I looked at them and I said, it really doesn't matter what I say right now. Because my answer to you, of course you know what the answer is of what I'm going to say, but I want to ask you a question. Regarding what you're asking me and what you've seen in my life through the time that I've known you, what do you think? What do you think? Do you think that I believe that we are at the end of the age? And the person said, absolutely. It's okay, good. Because I want my actions to match my words. See, if we are talking about being in exile, if we are talking about looking toward his kingdom, but all of our actions are basically well, we're just going to sink our roots a little farther down here, then our actions are not lining up with our words. And you may be able to fool some adults around you, but you won't fool the children. You won't fool the youth. They're smarter than that. They see what we're doing, not just what we are saying. I could probably go on with that for a long time. But the word Bamidbar is a fascinating word to me. It is translated wilderness or desert, and it was a desert environment. If you know anything about the topography, the topography of that area between Egypt and Israel, can be a little bit on the barren side. I've been down to Kadesh Barnea. I've been through some of those areas on the Sinai, and there's a whole lot of nothing happening down there. There's a lot of rocks, a lot of dirt, a lot of cactus, and a lot of things that want to bite you. But as far as lush, no, it's just not there. So the word desert really does describe the place, but that's not what the word really is in Hebrew. It is Mem Dalet Beit Resh. Okay, Bamidbar. Now, if you know and are trying to study Hebrew at all, you might see that there's another word in there. That if we take the Mem, which Mem is a letter that is speaking of water. Wait a minute. I thought this was desert. And why is it desert? Because there's not a lot of water. So the word that is being used for translated as desert actually has the word water in it, which should give us a clue that there's more to this picture than just a desert. But the rest of the letter, if we take the mem out of it, what do we get? The word davar, the word for word, which is dalet, beit, and resh, which is a kind of literal translation would be walking in the ways of the head of the house. We could translate it very easily that way. So they are being directed. Let's take the word wandering out, maybe, and let's put in being directed. Kind of like your GPS. You're driving along with your GPS on. What does it do? Well, if you're, driving across Texas on I-10 for about 800 and something miles, it's going to say absolutely nothing, unless you pull off of I-10 and get gas. And then it's going to tell you how to get back onto I-10. But other than that, that little girl or whoever you got in your GPS, it's just going to be silent for over 800 miles until you get 10 miles from the border, and in your turn, it's going to tell you that you have a turn in about 10 miles. Then it's going to tell you in about 2. Then every time you get a little closer, what's she going to do? She's going to start talking to you more. And then it's almost in that last quarter mile or so, it's like you're nagging, I know to turn here. The Father was directing them step by step. One of my favorite songs, and one that's I just go back to over and over again. It's Kathy and I and our family commemorated, I guess you could say celebrated, but commemorated. We didn't do much celebration. A day 13 years ago now. Imagine that. It was 13 years ago on May 10th. That about 6:30 in the evening, we were watching the television in Oklahoma, and all of a sudden there is just making up over time, there's a tornado And that tornado is heading pretty much in our direction, in our vicinity. And many of you that have been with us for a long time, you remember that time. We sure do. That thing just decided to go right over the top of our house. And it caused quite a bit of chaos and confusion. And so here I am 13 years later in a different type of chaos and confusion. But I understand a concept. And the concept comes from a song that if someone was to ask me to have a theme song for their life, I remember Brad Scott of blessed memory on the stage, on the platform at Revive a number of years ago. And Brad knew at that time that he had some health issues. And so at the end of his message that day, he said if there was ever one song that I would have wanted to write, he said it would have been this song. And he started playing the song Creation Calls. Beautiful song. For me, it's a totally different song by a totally different person, Rich Mullins. It is the song Step by Step. I go back to that song over and over and over again in my life, and it just speaks at such a level. This was a song that 30 years ago, as Kathy and I were preparing right now this time of year to move from Tucson, Arizona to Wakulla County, Florida, and eventually take over a church. That was the song then. That was the song that has helped me through most everything of life. That it's step by step. So their uncharted, so-called wanderings was just their step by step. And they had a choice on a daily basis. I was talking with someone last night about just some issues in life. And we were talking about, there's some stirring that's happening. I don't know if you're feeling that with you, but I know that we're feeling that. I know a lot of people that are feeling this kind of a stirring that's happening. And there's some things that's like, wait a minute, where'd that come from? And what's the timing here? And reconciliation and various things that are going on. Don't be surprised whatever happens. Whatever's around that next mountain. Don't be surprised that there's something around that next mountain. Okay, that it may be something that you were not really expecting at the moment. But we were talking about, how could this play out? And the person looked at me and said, I really can't even go there. I just need to take it day by day and step by step. Ladies and gentlemen, I really believe that we're in a place in life that we must learn the life of faith, which means we're on a need-to-know basis. And there's a lot of things that he has declared that we don't need to know. And we can waste our time trying to find out answers to questions that we're not supposed to be asking. We're just supposed to have faith in him because it's in the wilderness, it's in the desert, that the mem. So what kind of water are they going to find? They're going to find, it's one thing when you live here in North Carolina, we've got water everywhere. I've got a well that I'm told is like 600 or 800 feet down. Really unlimited supply, it seems like, I guess. Never have had any issues. Our son Daniel, they hit an artesian well. They actually had to put a relief valve on it because it was too much water coming out of the well. And they've got this steady stream of water all the time. Well, that may happen in North Carolina or different places. If you're in Florida or somewhere in a jungle, But when you're in the wilderness, water is very difficult to come by. And the truth is, as I talked when I did preparedness years ago, that you have, without air, you've got about 3 minutes. Without food, you've got about 30 days. Without water, you got about 3 days. The truth is, if you don't have water, you're going to make it through about a day and a half to 2 days. And if you don't start to find something there, that last day, you're going to get to the point that you just really can't move on from there. And so water is your priority in the desert. Water is precious. You know, here in North Carolina, I can turn the faucet on and just leave it on. It doesn't really, it's not going to make a difference except for my electric bill turning over the well pump. But if you're in the wilderness, you ration every single drop of water. There's not a drop of water that is not used for some reason and benefit. And if it starts to rain, you collect every bit of it you can. And that water is precious. So it's in the wilderness that we find a different kind of water. We find His Word. That's the word here, bamidbar. We find His living Word, His living water. We find a revelation of Messiah in the desert. Why? It's like the deer panting for the waters. So many verses, especially in the book of Psalms, that speak about water, because we should be thirsting, not just for the physical water of our lives, but every step of this walk that we have in the Bamidbar, in the wilderness, in the desert, should be causing us to thirst more and more for His life-giving Word. Now it says in verse 2, yeah, I've made it already to verse 2. It says that you are to take a census from the entire assembly of the people of Israel. That's probably the worst possible way that you could translate this instruction. Take a census. For those of us in the United States, we know that by law, it is required that a census be taken every year. Or excuse me, every 10 years, I guess it is. And we all don't look forward to that, because that census has become an information gathering study, and who knows what it's being used for. I was a little freaked out the other day. I got in my in the car to drive to Life Assembly, and of course, this is something that we do almost every Shabbat. And so I was doing something, and I just wanted to look at once again, because I had to do some planning of a trip that I'm supposed to be taking. And so I looked just to see what that was. It brought it up on I brought up maps, and it actually gave me, not in the history, but it gave me a hint of where our congregation is. I didn't ask it to, but it's like, wait a minute. My phone has figured out, not my phone, but the people behind my phone have programmed it to figure out that usually every Saturday about 1:30 or so, I'm going to be driving to a certain place in Franklin, North Carolina. And so it actually is now recording and telling me things that I didn't want it to know. That's a little unnerving at times. So this census thing, we consider it in our own minds as, well, God's wanting to know how many people are there, and how many of them are, of in this clan and tribe, and how many are in this tribe, and how many in this family, and do we have 2.7 children per family? Where are they camped at? No, he's not looking for information here. That's the last thing. He doesn't need that information. He has all of that information. So the word here is the word NASA in Hebrew. Of course, that's very similar to the National Aeronautic Space Administration. Well, I think I got that one right. But it means, and this is, I don't believe that they termed NASA the Space Administration based upon the Hebrew word. I doubt that, but it's a pretty good play on the acronym, because the word means to lift up. It means to, we could literally translate it this way, lift up the heads of the entire assembly. I know that I've taught on this probably 100 times, but I think that it's so much needed in our day. A reminder to lift up our heads. The Hebrews came out of Egypt. It's been 1 year and 2 months ago that they were slaves. That they had no, in their minds, though it was prophesied that they had a, to quote Jeremiah, they had a hope and a future. Yeah, it had been prophesied even before they knew where Egypt was. They had been told through Abraham that they were going to be in exile in Egypt. But somewhere along the way, they had lost the hope. They had lost the future. They had become slaves. A slave normally does not look toward the horizon. A slave normally, if you've studied anything about slavery, of the the horrific things, and I'm not just talking about slavery that's happened here in the United States. There are still slaves today. You go to China. Most of our technology, is made by slave labor. What judgment are we all going to stand in at some time for knowing that this was happening, but then continuing to purchase the products for our, for our benefit, for our recreation, for just the, what we think are the basic necessities of life? Yeah, I know that whole subject is one that we're probably one day going to have to reckon with that. But slavery didn't just start in the United States. You look at the history of slavery in the United States, and what's being taught is absolutely backwards. One of the first slave owners was black. These people were being sold by their own people. It just goes on and on from there. But slaves normally look to the ground. They have their eyes on the ground in front of them because that's their only future. And so they're coming out of that, trying to come out of that, I guess, with they're trying to live as free men and women, but still having a bit of a slave mentality. Oh, I guess I need to ask the question here. For those of us that by faith in the Messiah, by faith in the redemptive work of Yeshua, we call ourselves free. We call ourselves redeemed. And this is, I'm not trying to point a finger here at anyone. I'm not thinking, trying to think of a certain person to speak to here. This is just a question for me, a question for all of us. Are we are we living as are we living how do I put this? Are we living as free people but with a slave mentality? I think that statement may be much more truth within those words. We are still in the process of redemption. And part of the process of redemption is finding Messiah in our own wilderness, finding him in our own deserts, finding that living water in the places that it looks like it's absolutely dry and barren and there's nothing there. And all of a sudden, we find a word in his word. We find a word in prayer. We find a word in our interaction with other people. You know, with our congregations, for those of you that have a congregation, if you don't, and I know it's difficult. It's difficult sometimes to find someone out there. You've got teachers, you got this, this video, the various ones that I do. I pray. When I sit down and open the scriptures and begin to expound on what I've seen for this week, it's my prayer that I would be able to give you a bit of a sip of water. That I'd be able to give you something. I would be able to help you find something in the Word this week that would be the life-giving water unto you. But as far as our congregations, I have to tell you, I spent a lot of time traveling, as most of you know, many years traveling. I was on the road a lot. But when I was home on Shabbat, it was just, okay, I got a whole day of rest. And now I don't. I have a congregation. And there's times that I'm getting up in the morning going, I just as soon kind of sit out this one. It's been a long week. There's been a lot going on. And I find that every time that I go, and this happened this past week, wow, it happened 2 weeks ago, I find that sip of water. I find that place. We need to be serious about where we place ourselves in life. Let us place ourselves in the areas that are known to have water. If all we're doing is visiting places that are not known to have water, people can spend all their time at the movies, and they can spend their time at this concert and that. And I'm not picking on anything, and this news and that news and the talk shows and the talking heads of which I guess I am one. But if you're spending all of your time in places that are not known to have water, then don't be surprised when you're really thirsty and you feel like you're dying. He says that they are to lift up their heads. And then one of the most fascinating verses to me, the men 20 years old and over who were subject to military service were recorded by name. As I've been taking Kathy, and she's been, at doctor's appointments and stuff, they're always asking for your last four of your Social Security number. You call your bank. You call whatever. What do they want to know? They want to know the last four of something. They want to know your phone number. They want to know your PIN number. The last thing that they want to know actually is your name. They may ask your name out of, well, we need to be polite here, but in the end, your name is not of any concern to them. What is a concern? It's that number. And here, what's so wonderful about this word is that he says, I want them known by name. The very fact that this is just a principle here, that is carried over into, that he knows us, the creator of the universe knows us by name. He doesn't call, if when he sends his messengers to us, he doesn't say, go down and give this message to number 3457. He doesn't do that. He gives the message to them for us by name. That to me is something that I never really get over in life. I never really get over the concept that the one who spoke the world into existence also knows where I am at all times. I've never been lost. I've thought I was lost a few times, but I was never lost. Because he doesn't lose anything. He knows exactly where we all are. And he knows exactly what each of us is going through. He knows the wilderness, the desert that we're in, and he's guiding us step by step. And part of that guidance is in chapter 2, where he tells them that they are to be in camps. We read about how in Exodus, how he brought them and they set up camps, and then they set up camp, which is a plural and then a singular, that it looked kind of maybe, though they came out in military array, it looked like a military parade going out of Egypt, but it was still chaotic. And he brought them out into the wilderness, and there he began to give them order in their lives. He told them, you're to camp over here and you're to camp over here. And I think that as we continue this process, as maybe our days of exile are approaching an end, may it be, that he will be bringing more order into our camps. He will be bringing more order into us individually, or at least giving us the option for such. I would dare say that there are many who, given an opportunity for order, would turn it down. It's kind of like the homeless situations and the mental problems and all these other issues that we have in the world today. They've become people's identity. I was sitting yesterday at the hospital in the waiting room, and I was just overwhelmed at the people there that are, they look like they were already dead. Many of them. The weight issues, the health issues. I saw a lady at a grocery store yesterday that was in one of those scooter things, and it was just sad. When I saw her, I heard her order 4 Subways, it wasn't Subway, it was a different one, 4 sub sandwiches. And I'm just looking at these people and thinking, for many people, given the opportunity for order, for better in their lives, they would choose what they have. I believe that as we continue and get closer to the end of exile, that the Father is going to be giving us the opportunity for order. A few years ago, the theme at Revive was from scattered to gathered, I believe it was. And this was about people that are we've been scattered all over the place as a people. I used to travel, and it was crazy the number of groups that were all over, and now it seems like there's an opportunity for people to kind of start coming back together a little bit more, maybe to start finding their Goshens. But is it just physical? Is physical gathering, is that really what the focus is? Or are we as a collective, I don't like to use the word we, but as we as a collective, are we missing the real issue? That the problem that we must deal with is not the physical scattering, but the spiritual and emotional scattering. You can bring a group of dysfunctional people together, and that does not make them non-dysfunctional. That doesn't make them bringing chaos into somewhere. Just because you bring a lot of chaos into one place doesn't give it order. It probably gives it more chaos. And so if all that is being done is bringing a group of dysfunctional people together and not dealing with the dysfunction, and if you don't know that there is dysfunction in those that proclaim to be following Messiah, proclaim that they are following Torah, if you don't believe that there's dysfunction there, you're not on Facebook, because it's rampant. And until we begin to deal with the dysfunction, it doesn't matter how many of us come together, it's just going to make more dysfunction. Chapter 4, I got 2 minutes. It talks about that what they were to do with the tabernacle. The tabernacle is a place that is a structure that's in. I talked about this home versus house and all these things last few weeks, but it's to be in the center of the camp. I asked a question, another one of those rhetorical questions. Is he actually in the center of everything we do? Is he? Do we base our decisions in life on his presence, on his word, on his ways? Or is it more like, well, I'm going to be doing this and this, and then if I have time for him, or in order for there to be order, we must put him back in the middle, the center of our camp. See, this is about Shabbat. Quickly into Shabbat. Every decision we make in the 6 days of our week should be based upon the Shabbat, which will bring order into the rest of the week. So if we're too busy during the week for Shabbat, we need to maybe get back to prioritizing where the Almighty is in our personal camps. Well, with that, Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. Have a blessed, prosperous week. Thank you again for your prayers during this time. I'll try to keep people as up to date as I can without going into details, but I appreciate your prayers. Your generosity during this time helps out tremendously, and I thank you for that. So until next week, be strong.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.